Hello, can everyone hear me? I'm Andrea Thompson, I'm Editor-in-Chief at Marie Claire, and I'm really delighted to be here today to host this event, which is the third one in our series of DEI events this year. And today we're going to be talking about racial diversity in the media industry, which is something that's had a lot of conversation over the last few years. You know, it's been a lot in the news, and some of the stuff we're going to look at is whether actually anything has really changed and what needs to happen in the long term to create sustainable change. And, you know, when I look around this room and I walk into offices and teams that I work, you know, in the building where I work, there certainly has been some progress. You know, there is more diversity on news floors than 20 years ago when I started. But I do think progress is quite slow in terms of getting people into those senior leadership roles, the decision-making roles. And something that we've spoken about also at the BSME is that there is a problem at the other end as well. You know, we want to recruit from different communities, but we all have issues reaching those communities. And also, when I do a lot of events with young journalists trying to break into the industry, when I chat to them afterwards, the feedback is often, I don't feel that the media industry is for me. I still feel that I might have to try and assimilate or be something that I'm not to succeed there. So there are some problems, and, you know, we're here today to discuss those with a brilliant panel and to look at how we can change things. And I think it's really nice, everybody's got quite a nice balance of experiences, and some of them, you know, they haven't long been through that experience of interviewing for roles and, you know, and interning, and it would be quite nice to hear what they've been through. So anyway, let's meet them. I'm going to introduce them one by one. Hannah is an international journalist and presenter. She founded We Are Black Journos in 2008 after working at the BBC and seeing a lack of representation in the newsroom. Today, the organisation works with leading news and media organisations to encourage more diversity and spotlight the brilliant work of black journalists. The network includes over 5,000 journalists and media executives. Dennis is European Design Director at GLAMOUR. He has over 10 years experience in creative direction and started his career at Company magazine before moving into PR. His role at GLAMOUR involves overseeing creative direction for UK Glamour Plus, Spain and Germany as well. And Hikmat is the Fashion and General Assignments Editor, London at WWD. He covers fashion, beauty, art and culture, and he began his career at Elle before moving to the Sunday Times and the Daily Telegraph. So let's go straight in with you, Dennis, if you don't mind. What was your perception of the magazine industry before you started working?
Like you said, quite felt like it wasn't for me. So I think I have to talk about when I first applied for a job and got the interview. It was with Deborah, and I obviously did research, and after I found out that she wasn't, say, white, I don't know, something made me feel like I had a better chance. I had to examine why. So I think look at, you know, magazines traditionally, the content I felt like wasn't for me. So if the content wasn't for me, what made me think the people behind it kind of represented me? So I think when I saw Deborah and I saw that she was brown, I think maybe I would be seen for the skills that I brought to the table rather than just maybe my appearance. So that was quite subconscious. I had to really just look back and feel like, oh, why did I think that? So the people doing the hiring, I think, are the first people I would meet. So that was my experience. So I think the people who are gonna obviously give me the chance have a lot of power. So, and I think it's perception for me. The fact that because she was brown, maybe I might make it.
So what can companies do to sort of attract people like you and make people like you feel that this industry is for them? Is it about having people sort of visible?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see more hiring managers and more diversity there, as well as people in prominent positions. But Maybe it's too much, not too much, but maybe the people in this room could do more. So when I say we, I mean us. If this is a topic that's very important to you, I think there's more things that we can do to raise the profile of like POC in prominent positions in spaces like this. Do outreach on your own social channels. I think not just relying on companies to do all the heavy lifting. I think, yeah, there's responsibility there if this is something that's important to you as an individual.
Do you feel that when you first got into your job, you tried to assimilate a bit, or you covered up parts of yourself, or not this particular job, because obviously you're feeling a bit more comfortable. When you first got into the industry, was there a sense that you would maybe try and be somebody else, or tone down parts of?
Yes, I think subconsciously, yes. Yeah. I wasn't too oh man, I don't want to be too Asian or too this, but I guess maybe that's just being professional, but I guess I learned very quickly how to read the room, how to adjust, or code switch, as you would call it. I think there is a little bit of that, but I'm not sure if it's entirely about race the whole time. I guess that's just my work ethic. I just wanted to be professional, but that might be a generational thing. Yeah. I'm a latter end of millennial. I don't know. I didn't feel like it was something I had to wear on my sleeve.
Yeah. Hannah, why did you set up We Are Black Journos in the beginning? Tell me about your experience after you left university and went into the media.
Sure. Yeah. So. I got into the British Broadcasting Corporation. We all know where that is. And that was immediately after graduating. So I thought, wow, this is incredible, not going to be broke. And I got in via the Creative Access Trainee Scheme. And it's so interesting because at that time, I didn't think anything of what's the diversity going to be like or anything of that sort. I thought, this is the BBC, this is going to be incredible. And my first experience of working was at Radio 2. It was a building formerly known as Western House, now called Wogan House. There was over 150 people in the building, 5 black people, 2 cleaners, 2 security guards, and me. So that was my introduction. That was my first year of working there. And I was still very determined and grateful to also be amongst a cohort of other diverse trainees that were there. So it was kind of like we had each other's back. Still very much so aspiring to, just gain better perspective and explore the opportunities in the building and to network with many others. So international news was definitely something that I was interested in. So let's say at this point we're about 3-ish to 4 years into the Beeb, and I got an attachment to work at a department who produce podcasts for audiences, and a majority of those audiences don't even speak English as a first language. So in my head I'm thinking, oh my goodness, the production unit is going to be full of everything, every colour, every background. So excited. And then what did I experience when I was there? A repeat of what happened when I started in 2014, being the only non-white person in a department of nearly 800 people this time. And I remember seeing the editor making a tea, and joined him, had a tea, and I don't think the words came out correctly, but I said, don't you find it cringe? Like the fact that you are producing this incredible content, but the people that it's going to have no relation to the people who are making it. And he went bright red. And it was that conversation alone that made me just want to rush home, do a ton of research. I think I was on the computer for about 6+ hours, and I didn't see any physical platform or network that specifically caters to black journalists in the UK, where at that point in 2018 there was 0.2% of black journalists in the UK. It was a mortifying statistic. And another thing that I also learned from Creative Access, one of my favorite, most used quotes ever, but is so important, is that media cannot reflect society if society is not reflected in the media? And it was just, so crucial to create that physical networking space, which We Are Black Journos is known for, to connect, celebrate, and empower Black journalists within the UK. And it's just amazing to see what we've achieved in 5 years through the power of community building and collaboration. I'm sure we'll get into that more later as well.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, you came into Future and did an event with us, and you go into places like the Financial Times and the Telegraph, and you speak to those companies, don't you? What are the key challenges that you think they face in connecting with black talent, and what specific kind of tools do you give them to address it?
Yeah, I would say that whatever rule book they're using clearly isn't working. Whether it's the, once a year, let's throw out this report to see that we've hired like 2 more black people in a year, woohoo. It's not really that. I think we just need to go beyond that boring admin, those silly guidelines, and actually tap into and speak to the communities that are actively working towards it. And it's not even just in journalism. Like, there are so many other industries. I've seen it in comms, I've seen it in PR. There are black-led industries that are working towards better diversity and inclusion. That's why I think the power of collaboration is so important, because clearly, like, you've been doing these, yearly reports and whatever kind of statistics, and it's just not working. And I find that because this is something that's quite new. I mean, We Are Black Journos, we're nearly 5 years old, and quite a few of other organisations that I've seen catering to other industries are quite new too. There is almost that unsureness of how to reach out. Like, should I send a DM? Should I send an email? Like, what exactly should I say? I mean, well, the follow button is definitely one. And sending an email is another. You don't necessarily need to pour out your life story to say, oh my gosh, I'm just tired of seeing like 300 white faces every day, which is, certain things that we've been told in the past. But it could just be the case of, we want to learn a bit more about what you do, and we want to know how we can improve on that. And there are several ways that people collaborate with We Are Black Journos, for example. So like we did with Future, when I was in conversation with Andrea, which was really fun. The topic of conversation, because there were so many people that love writing, was about beyond diversity in publishing. Considering the fact that many of the attendees come from different backgrounds, whether it's, blogging or fashion or real life interviews, like how can I continue that? So we always have a focus point of that. But of course, the key message that we send across is that we want this to happen amongst the black community and beyond. But it just starts with a little conversation, a meeting, and seeing how we can work together. And another thing to touch on that is the importance of allyship. It's not just a one-off event. If you actually look at, there's many definitions for allyship, but it's actually a lifelong relationship when you realize that there's a marginalized group, and you want to step in, not as a savior, but you step in because you realize that you have that, privilege. It's not like those boring phone contracts that you can't wait for it to end or something. This is something that is lifelong, that you're working towards. So that is another really important thing. It's not seasonal. It's something that you want to see for the long term.
Thank you. Hikmat, you did 10 internships, didn't you, before you got a job? And that's kind of quite common for people to move around. What sort of challenges did you face, and what were the people like that you were interning with? What were your experiences?
I think all the people that I was interning with, it was just like the Barbie film. Everybody was stereotype Barbie, and one right after the other. And then I think when I was applying for jobs, and then when I was losing out the jobs to the people, it was always the same people getting the same jobs. And I remember one instance where I think I'd been interning for so long, and then this girl went on like a study abroad, to find herself. And then she comes back 6 months later, we both apply for this job, she gets it, and I didn't. And I was like, oh my God, wait, I've been interning all this time while she's just been traveling. But then the publication that hired her, and like the people that, I guess they all look like each other and they come from the same background.
Do you think you're disadvantaged because of your background, and maybe even at the first port of call in terms of your name is Hikmat Mohammed, and you're clearly not coming from like of a background that a lot of the people in the industry were from? Do you feel that really was something?
I think partly, but also partly because I'm also a guy and who wants to do women's wear and women's wear fashion.
Yeah.
So I think most publications look for girls or women to join them, and then because you can be photographed for the pages, you can be the face of the pages, and I think that was partly a disadvantage as well. But then you kind of need to know people to get, what do you call it, a foot into the door. And I remember after each internship, I would email this one glossy magazine saying, "Hi, I've done a new internship. Can I come in for an internship?" And they'd be like, "No." And then by my fourth internship, they were like, "Yes." And I was like, "Okay, fine. I'm finally in."
Yeah. Do you feel like the recruitment process was an open one where you knew why people were being kind of given jobs over you? Because often the whole recruitment process can be a bit closed, can't it?
I mean, the feedback was just never clear. And I think that was just really disheartening. And then you walk away like, what is it? Is it me? Is it my name? Is it my experience? Do I not know the right people? So I think going into all these sort of situations, and I think with my first job at Elle magazine, that was the first time where I came in, they spoke to me, they set me a task, and I felt like, okay, this is fair. But then again, it was two women of colour who were interviewing me at the time, so I think that's where I got my first job. So I was like, okay, I feel kind of seen. I remember like sitting with my editor and like I looked at her and I was like, oh my God, we kind of look alike, we're dressed alike. And then I was like, okay, no, I don't know, I walked away feeling really positive afterwards.
Do you feel that fashion and beauty, or perhaps areas where you worked at the Telegraph and other sort of mainstream big publications, did you feel that perhaps the fashion teams were a little bit more open than perhaps features or news?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think news and features are so much scarier and much more homogenous, whereas fashion is, I know it gets a bad rep, but actually it's more diverse and more accepting of people, and I don't know, it's a bit more open than the features desks, because I guess when I've worked at newspapers, the features desks they've all gone to the same universities, they all know the same people, so I think, yeah.
Hannah, do you feel that there's a problem with gatekeeping in terms of, HR departments and commissioning editors, just sort of, there isn't much transparency, is there?
No, and that can make it quite confusing because, with many organizations, there's almost like a bit of a funneling process. I mean, I would say most of my industry has been at the Beeb. So in the term of a layout of when you're being interviewed for a job, for example, they have to make sure there's at least 3 people in there interviewing you of different genders, different races or abilities. I know that's always been a standard, despite the interview process, which can be a bit tricky. But then sometimes I think we kind of need to look above that because you hear some stories and cases about an editor, they've just gone like the back route and they may have hired a friend or etc., which can be really tricky for people that are just coming out cold with no connections or anything. So I feel like there needs to be a bit of transparency between the people at the top and the people at the very top that are just going through the funneling process. Is it still a commonality where someone is judged by what their surname sounds like in comparison to someone who has more of a British sounding surname? So even me, with the work that we do at We Are Black Journos and the several conversations we have with senior members of staff, there doesn't seem to be much transparency and openness in terms of what is happening right at the top in order to determine the successful applicants, because clearly there are many people in these organizations that are tired of seeing the same repetitive process. So something needs to be challenged, and I still feel like it's kind of hidden in the dark.
Yeah. One of the things that was quite interesting when you came into our company was, you brought in a lot of young writers who were quite keen to get into the industry, and the feedback they were giving me is like, we don't know who to approach, you know, and likewise, you know, editors don't know how to find often that talent. What advice can you give to anybody in the room who wants to broaden their freelance pool? Because often, you know, you're rushed, you haven't got high budgets, you just tend to go to the same people. What advice can you give? How can we find people outside our usual pools?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to plug the heck out of We Are Black Journos, but I am. Definitely do get in contact. But one of the most common hashtags that we see on Twitter, for example, even if you use it once a year, is journo request. With me, I'm very black and white about it. If I'm looking for a black person in this, I will say a black person. I don't think that there's anything wrong with using that term. So the same way that you want a journo request for, you know, a black fashion writer to talk about X, Y, and Z, say it. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. And, you know, always searching keywords as well. There are several amazing black writers, journalists, photographers, filmmakers. We're all over the internet. So just taking a bit of time to search for that really helps. LinkedIn, even if you're not on social media, I would just say utilizing and widening your search.
Thank you. Dennis, you wrote a really powerful piece during lockdown about Asian hate, and I thought what's quite interesting about it is you really brought your unique perspective as a designer. You talked a lot about, and you've talked a lot about imagery and the use of imagery and how that can reinforce stereotypes. What was the impact of that article, and you know what was the response?
The impact for me was a personal one. I feel like just the fact that I had a platform or I had a team that supported me I felt like I did something. So just anybody reading it who was experiencing Asian hate, I think would be a win for me. Just because I just wasn't reading about this point of view, because so much of the articles at the time were about, you know, a lot of harmful rhetoric, and you know, I was frustrated about the imagery used, because there often are the people depicted in these articles and images were just ordinary people. So in the time where everyone's looking for someone to blame, I felt like the people in the imagery became a target, and these were everyday people.
And in what way was that? How do you feel that they sort of reinforced those negative stereotypes?
It was just anyone with a mask, any Asian person with a mask. So that looked like me, that looked like my friends, that looked like my family, and obviously, you know, all the hate that came from it, I would say is a direct impact. So, yeah, so I think the imagery, I want to bring light to, you know, just to highlight, you know, images are worth 1,000 words, and I think just even thinking about, okay, how would this article impact people reading it? Because it just gives, it's, you know, we bring light to certain topics, and if it is just somebody walking across the street with a mask, that is, you have a responsibility to you know, kind of think about what this means for people that look like that. So I was just worried about my friends and family who were just being attacked for no reason other than having a mask. We were experiencing the very same things that everyone is, at the time. So this article was cathartic in a lot of ways, but just felt like I did something.
Diversity is also about being part of a team where you feel heard and you feel safe expressing your views as well, isn't it? How can editors best do that, and what support can they give, you know, to people that, you know?
Well, I look at our team at GLAMOUR. I certainly think we have a good balance. I really, for me, feel safe in our morning meetings to talk about. I'll bring my own experience and lens through to any topic, and I feel like the whole team can say that as well. But I don't think we got here overnight. I think it takes a whole team to like he was saying, to continually foster this environment, because I think the team may come and go, but I think you don't start from zero if you have this culture where, you know, people feel safe to talk about. And I don't just mean racial diversity. I mean it could be, sexuality, it could be just religion, any type. I just feel like the way we've done it has worked.
Diversity is so important, in terms of our teams, but also our content, isn't it? And Hikmat, this is something that you always strive to do with the content that you're producing. Have you ever had any challenges anywhere that you've worked in terms of trying to be representative of all groups?
I think my first lesson at Elle magazine was whenever you're choosing the imagery for the catwalks, and we would use 1 million catwalk images, it was to always go to choose diversity instead of just choosing models that look the same. And I think I didn't really think about that when I started, but then my editor was like, no, this is how you put diversity first, and this is the change that you make. The small changes of choosing these runway images rather than choosing, all the same models with the blonde hair and blue eyes. But then when I worked at a few newspapers, I remember we would do the spreads on the Wednesday, and we'd have images from all across the high street, and once we were told, oh, this page is way too brown, we need more white models on this. And there was another instance where they're like, oh no, why is everybody so plus size on this page? Can we have more stick thin people? And I guess on fashion we tried to fight back, but the features teams would always win because there was more of them and they all looked the same on the features team, and they would come back to us. So I think that was kind of stopping us on fashion, but then we would go behind their backs from the online piece and we would put the photos that we wanted to use, and then in the paper it would be something else. I think that's how we would try and to come about it. But I guess what Dennis said about writing pieces, and one of the magazines I worked at was, if you're a person of color, they'd always make you write about your race. And I think that's one thing I've always stayed away from. It's I don't want to write about my race, my sexuality, or anything, because that way I become XY person who writes about this thing.
Yeah, and I think that is an issue, isn't it, Hannah? We talked about this before, how a lot of editors do want to sort of straight lace you into that, and you can get pigeonholed. Is that something that's happened to you before, or other members of your network? Is that something that this is a very slippery slope, isn't it? You can get trapped.
Absolutely. I mean, I would always say no. First of all, and again, it's just really important for people to know that, especially in the Black community, we are not a monolith. We exist in so many different spaces, whether it be sci-fi, tech, sport, fashion, you name it. For example, in the almost 9 years that I've been working at the Beeb, I've never worked at one extra. The amount of times I have been asked if that is a department that I've worked at before. We exist in so many different spaces, but in the We Are Black Journos community, we have our private channels where people do share their frustrations, they want to pitch stories about the arts or something, but they're always being, oh my gosh, wouldn't think I do what I do, right? So yeah, people would be told, oh yeah, there's this knife crime story that's happened, why didn't you go there? Do you know this musical artist? It's just constant assumptions, and the danger of that. So let's say if you do have someone that's from a misrepresented background and they happen to be in your editorial team, some editors or whoever is senior on the team think that they've ticked that box. So I have that one representation of the entire community, and that is absolutely wrong. You just have a sliver of someone that represents that community. They may not even know who Beyonce is. You can't assume. Okay, well, let me not say the Beyonce one. No. But you get what I mean. So we can't assume that they speak for the entire Black community. But yeah, I do understand the frustrations. And even in reverse, I know some amazing Black journalists that work in programs that aren't so representative, like morning breakfast shows, and they're really passionate about it, but they're the only ones, so they can often feel alienated as well. There is nothing wrong with just having a chat in the initial stages. I really appreciate even the busiest of editors that don't even have all the time in the world, but they have an awareness of the things that I'm interested in, because I believe that you can be jack of all trades, master of all. You don't necessarily have to sit in one box. So the fact that they're open to the things that you're open about, that's the start of progress, and not feeling as though you can't experiment with your interests.
What advice would you give then to editors managing a team of talent that is actually sort of, or managing people from minority backgrounds?
I would say just treat it like it's normal, because news, there's literally a different story every day. You don't know what you're going to get, but just be open to different ideas from people. Don't assume. It's the last thing you should ever do. Treat things with care, just as if it was anyone else. Some people may have a close connection to a story or an idea, and some people may not. But I think just starting with openness and clarity, and actually taking time out to know the people that you're working with, it goes a really long way. Yeah.
How do you feel, and I suppose this is one for everybody, but like, how do you feel social media has influenced diversity in the media? Do you feel that perhaps there are different images now of different types of races? We're more visible, perhaps. Dennis, maybe you can answer that one.
In that sense, I felt like social media was incredible, just because access is important to me. So I was able to maybe have more access to people that I looked up to. For example, Eva Chen, who would post about what she did. Obviously, she held a really prominent position, and who was someone I looked up to. So her posting about her life, her job, just gave me an insight to just more of her. I think historically, before social media, these were just people up there, quite distant, out of reach. But I could actually see how they work, how they just got to access the more. I think it's more impactful than just to read an article about them, than kind of seeing a more intimate side. I think that's really powerful to me.
Do you have any thoughts on that, Hannah?
Yeah, I think it's great when you see it as well. So we know at We Are Black Journos the amount of editors that are just really impressed with the different spaces that Black journalists occupy, and social media has helped that. Whether it's been a viral story or a video or a particular project that they worked on. So it's amazing because, of course, it's free, right? And we can use it to our advantage to literally showcase our talent, to build our online portfolio, and to let people know what we're about. So that's something that I always encourage young journalists or those that are aspiring in the media to also do, especially as an advantage before you even join a big broadcasting corporation or organization, that you have your own thing, you have your own brand, you're building your own identity. So we literally have that at our fingertips. So as well as obviously people being able to see that, it's important that we utilize it as well to show people what we're about, as opposed to them assuming what we're about.
I think it's such a community because you find people, whereas before I used to buy magazines and scan through the masthead and to see who was who, and I'd make a list of every single person in these magazines, and like from Self-Service to Vogue Paris, I can't even read French, but I would look at the names and I'd buy it for the images. And I think, but now you can just have it at your fingertips, and you go on somebody and you know what they're about and the kind of people that you follow and you support.
This is one for all of you, really. Hannah, you may have some stories about people that you've spoken to through your network. How can companies do a better job, not just of hiring, but retaining talent and making people feel like they belong in the organisation?
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways about it. I mean, I've been a freelancer since 2019. I don't think I could go back to full-time work. But yeah, people are quite different. So it's understanding how people like to work. There are some people that are very project-based, so maybe it's one big project per year. Even making that connection with someone and contacting them a couple times a year, it actually means so much, because it means that you've remembered them. It keeps their mind at ease in knowing, okay, even though being a freelancer out here is tough, this person believes in my work and they regularly look out for me. Sending stuff that's of interest to these people. Like, again, I think just the main emphasis is relationship building despite whatever level you're at. And as for the full-timers, I would say it's just, again, yeah, probably similar to being a freelancer, just keeping in contact, check-ins occasionally as well, being open to commissioning, and even diversifying that pool as well. I understand, obviously, in a news environment, it can be very busy, and etc. And I've seen many editors just go to the same old phone book, but it's just really important to know that there are so much fresh talent out there. So even if you set yourself a personal reminder, okay, once every couple of months I'm going to send out a tweet or I'm going to send out an email to say, hey, I'm looking for X, Y, and Z to join my pool. Please let me know who you have on. It really makes a difference, and it can essentially really help to enhance your own platform as well.
Dennis, how do you feel that companies can sort of retain talent from underrepresented communities?
I think a very good tool is, I think, word of mouth. I think asking your peers. I think that's just I think more eyes are better than one for me, and I think you also trust in the power of recommendation. And certainly, if you and your peers share the same values, I think there's a really understanding of what you're looking for there, and I think that's a good place to start. I think it's worked for me in the past where I felt like I found the right person for the right project, as opposed to just seeing who's the closest, throwing it out there and see who responded. That for me.
Do you, and talking about, sort of sharing values and we've talked a bit about transparency, do you use any of those resources like Glassdoor or, those...
I'm very passionate about this one, just because throughout my career it's been a tool that I've used constantly, just because I think for me and my own personal experience as a person of colour, getting past the interview is already, the anxiety around that is just one stage. It's compounded by the fact that, okay, you make it through, you're in the office now. Is the culture a right fit for me? Because I think, I've heard many stories about, making it through the door, and the culture fit is you're just a diverse hire, and the culture does nothing to uphold that. So you're in a worse position than you started. So things, sites like Glassdoor help me make an informed decision. So I want to read about the good, bad, and the ugly, because I think I have a realistic expectation about what hard work looks like. So I'm not expecting everything to be amazing. I just want to gauge whether I am prepared to, if I can thrive in the environment. So I think I always encourage people to fill out Glassdoor, their experiences. I think it can empower someone to maybe take on a role or not. And I think everyone should do it. Do your research, I would say.
Do you use that as well?
I think it's about just taking up space, and even if you feel uncomfortable, staying in your position, because I think when people leave their jobs and then it opens for other people to come in who look like them, and then that's why all these newspapers, it's all the same people. But I think when you take up space and you stay somewhere, you just have to make them feel uncomfortable. But you need to be you, and you need to come in and do your thing, and actually you play the long game as well, just as they have for the last 50 years. So I think when I worked at a few newspapers, I used to come in and just maybe in inappropriate outfits, really tiny shorts. And everybody would be like, oh my God, everybody's in suits. And somebody messaged me saying it's giving Basic Instinct when I was spinning around on my chair. But I was like, I can't really do anything about it. I'm working hard, and I'm not here. I don't know why you're looking at my legs. So I think it's just playing the long game.
Thank you. I want to finish up by asking you all what key change you'd like to see in the next couple of years, and maybe even a bit more long term, to our recruitment practices and our cultures, to encourage more diversity through our industry. Hannah, do you want to start?
Yeah, I would just say, honestly, more transparency and openness. It's one of the most accessible industries ever. It shouldn't actually be built to discriminate or alienate anyone. But I think because of how it was built, I think especially if we talk about in Britain, it was for decades and decades we saw the same demographic of people until we got the firsts breaking out of that. And now it's kind of a very slow burner, very slow progress. So it's really important to have a better transparency, and maybe to throw in the admin card if it was a yearly report to show the efforts being made to increase better diversity and inclusion, because with transparency comes accountability. If you're held accountable and you have to produce this change, then that would make people like probably be on their toes a little bit more. And it's out in the open. It's, I mean, again, media is free to access. It's in the public domain. So I think the efforts that's being made behind the scenes should also be put in the public domain as well. So that would be amazing to see. There are a few organisations that are doing it. So yeah.
Thank you, Hikmat. What would you like to see change?
I think maybe not change, but I think best people being more open to just going out there and putting themselves first and not being afraid of what will come with that, and especially when you're a person of colour or any kind of minority group. I think you just need to go for it, whereas that's what everyone else does. But I think there's a stigma where you get scared, I'm going to get rejected. And I think kind of letting that fear go in that way, when you do go for it, and people might be open to it, or people might not know who you are. And I think you just have to keep pushing, and actually if you don't keep pushing, then nothing really changes. I remember for my first job, I emailed 5 times until I got an interview. And I knew they were hiring for a girl because I knew 2 girls who had done the interview process, they didn't get the job. But I just kept pushing and pushing, and I think you need to really not give up on pushing. Be pushy, send emails.
Dennis?
I would maybe more spaces like this, more opportunities where, you know, as I say, in the future there is, you invite, you know, people of colour from, you know, prominent positions to be in a space, because often, you know, access again is important. And I've certainly met people starting out in their careers at events like this, where a conversation does really spark the inspiration. You can see just the dialogue between me and this person is all they've needed to just be like, yep, this is what I want. So I think that is more impactful to me in a short space of time.
I'd love to add to that, actually. So I'm part of a mentoring group, and I think finding a mentor within the industry, just reaching out to them and having someone kind of guide you through it from the start is quite helpful.
Yeah, I do mentoring as well. And in fact, that's something that you have spoken a lot about. Do you feel that mentoring still has that place, or do you feel that maybe we need to be looking at sponsorships to fund people? Because it's not just about somebody sort of sitting and talking to you, is it? You know, some people actually don't have the financial means to carry on, you know, and persist.
100%. So even with like the events that we do at We Are Black Journos, we've got young aspiring journalists coming from outside of London, and they're not even able to travel in. So thankfully, with the bits of funding that we get, we are able to cover travel costs. And, you know, we do something called WABJ Gives Back, where each month we give about 50 to 60 quid to a bunch of black journalists, and it could be for a variety of different reasons. So essentially putting your money where your mouth is does help, because it shows that you are actively trying to create the change as well. Mentoring is great, I completely understand it, but it's a two-way relationship. There are some mentees that are terrible with responding to emails, and there are some mentors who, you know, just forget about the coffee date that was booked in. So it's still quite powerful, but there is so much more that can also help with that as well.
Well, thank you so much to everyone today. I think that's just been such an engaging and insightful conversation. And I also want to say thank you to everyone who's shown up. I can't tell you how nice it is to look into a room that is so mixed. I've done so many of these events where everybody is brown, and I'm not speaking to the right people. It's brilliant to see such a cross section of people in the room, and some people that, you know, want to engage with this issue, and, you know, they it's outside something that they've experienced, and this is a really, really positive change. So thank you to everybody. We will be doing questions afterwards, so we'll be. You can approach us directly afterwards. We'll all be milling around, so do come up and say hi and ask any questions you have. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you also to the Rosewood for hosting us in this beautiful place and serving this fantastic breakfast. Do all stick around and tuck in. Make sure you eat something before you leave. Thank you to Juliet and David also for organising.